Have you testified before the grand jury?
I don't talk about anything J6 related.
Do you feel like it's appropriate, the investigation?
I'm not commenting on anything that relates to the president running or January 6th.
Have you spoken to Kathy Hutchinson before or after her testimony?
As I said, I don't comment on anything on January 6th, guys.
Lots of no comments. What does that response and the fact that he is not named as a co-conspirator in the indictment signal to you?
Yeah, he doesn't appear to be any of the 6 co-conspirators. Many of them are identifiable, as you alluded to. Mr. Meadows is a key figure in this. He was at the total epicenter of all of the plots, some of them pursued, some of them not. We know from the January 6th committee investigation some of the messages that he received and sent. So he's a key witness no matter what. He could be a star witness. All we know, if you want to be as careful as possible, is that this indictment doesn't view him as a co-conspirator. We don't know why. We don't know whether that involves cooperation and or whether a superseding or later set of indictments could change his legal status. If you want to go beyond the most careful reading and look at the evidence and the signals, it appears that the special counsel has some cooperating witnesses who were in the room. That's a small list of people. Mr. Meadows is on it, and he is someone that we might think could be one of those individuals.
And, of course, Chris Christie, a former prosecutor, of course, for 6 years, said when he looked at that first clip that he thought that it indicated that Mark Meadows, who has every right to talk about his own testimony in front of the grand jury, as any witness does when they come out, might be cooperating. His name does come up in the indictment, though, Larry. As you know, in paragraph 28, it alleges that Meadows advised Donald Trump in late December 2020 that Georgia officials reviewing ballot signatures were doing their jobs honorably and, well, only had to be contradicted by Donald Trump's tweets. So does this sort of detail point to the fact that Meadows is potentially a witness?
Well, yes, definitely potentially a witness and definitely tied to those things. And so I guess if we're asking the investigative question, right, as both of you have alluded to, he's in the rooms where it happened, and there's material that suggests that he was either at times pushing back or was not in agreement with the object of the conspiracy. Of course, we also have texts where he's sort of passing things along and he's sort of the ultimate switchboard, which is why he has this kind of, if you remember in T2, where the villain is sort of turns into that sort of liquid metal and then reconstitutes as different people, that's him legally, because he sort of is, at one point he's like passing on some of the most irresponsible conspiracy theories. Then at the other point, you just cited one that Jack Smith agreed with. He's saying, no, boss, we can't say that that's not true or that's not going to go anywhere. Well, is he both things? Is he both things at once? I mean, that's an epistemological kind of physical question. But for the legal purposes, yes, as you alluded to, Andrea, there are things in the indictment that suggest he is helpful to the government's case. So to put it simply, bad for Trump. Now I want to be clear, investigative-wise, it could be that they have Meadows saying that because he told them. It could be that they have, at times, other contemporaneous notes, whether he wanted them to get out or not. They have that. And it could be from other people. But everything written there, including what you just put on the screen, is something that the special counsel's office is confident it can prove in open court.
I have this sinking feeling, Ari Melber, that every time I see Mark Meadows now, I'm going to get a very different visual and involves melting. But let me move on to other folks who have been very faithful to Donald Trump. Axios reports that Trump's new legal defense fund for aides and employees may double as both an act of benevolence and a potential insurance policy against a practice he has long loathed. Flipping. There have been a lot of conversations about who's paying for various defendants, the legality of paying for various defendants. And then you have this question about whether or not it's an insurance policy for Donald Trump. Weigh in on that, Ari.
It certainly looks that way. I mean, again, in fairness to the defendant, he is both legally presumed innocent and free to fund his own counsel and others. There's nothing that we're inferring automatically negative about that. He can do that. On the other hand, we have our eyes open in the real world here. Donald Trump has gotten in trouble repeatedly for not paying his own lawyers for his own defense, along with stiffing other people. We've had some of those individuals tell their stories on this very network. There have been cases about that. So he is not known, shall we say, as a particularly generous person when it comes to paying lawyers. Now you have this attitude of paying other people's lawyers. And so is that just a newfound benevolence, or more likely is it, as that outlet Axios and others have written, part of a strategy here, and that is to try to incent a cooperation with people. There's also a huge power dynamic mismatch in the other special counsel Smith case, the classified documents case, because those are much more junior people. So we're all going to be watching to see whether the coalition, so to speak, holds.
Ari, I keep thinking about just how much detail is in this indictment, because it's such a narrative and there are so many quotes and it gets so granular in some of the scenes that it describes. Does anything else in this indictment signal to you that there are others who could have some legal peril now are cooperating witnesses?
You know, I can't say, and we can't sort of confirm or report that, so I want to be very precise about that. But I think the premise of your question checks out. I mean, there's some stuff in there that we all recognize from what played out in public and what the January 6th committee found. And then there's other levels of detail, examples that, again, I'm not saying the level of cooperation, but just that we have examples of Pence describing calls that only he and Trump, or perhaps one or two people in the room, would know. We have details there in the last couple pages where they talk about Trump seeming to be positive about what happened on the 6th from someone who was in their room. So those people are talking. There are reasons we don't yet know.
Ari Melber, who we will see a lot from the rest of the afternoon and into the evening. Thank you for being with us, Ari. Great to talk to you.